Welcome to another edition of Amplify Your Business. On today's show, we're going to be talking to Derek Manns. He is the co-founder and CEO of Stagehand. Now, Stagehand is a very innovative company. What they're doing is they're actually bridging this gap between live performers and venues that need to really spice things up and create a space that is inviting now that COVID is over and people are gathering in the public spaces. And so how do we reinvigorate public spaces? Live music is the answer, according to Derek. So welcome to the show, Derek.
Thank you.
So Derek, tell me a little bit about the business, when you started, what it is that you guys do exactly over there.
Sure. So as you mentioned, Stagehand is really we're a software platform that makes it easy for businesses to work with local artists. And particularly, we're focused on activating public spaces. So how I got here is a little bit of a long story, as these things often go. Ironically, my wife and I are both engineers, and we have 3 daughters who are all very talented performing artists.
Oh, excellent.
So my oldest is a dancer in New York. She's trying to figure out how to make a living as a dancer in New York right now. My youngest is in Toronto. But it was through the experience of my girls as they were growing up and the opportunities that they had to work with talented artists in the local community that I was really exposed to how much talent is out there. And it always seemed to me a shame that there wasn't more opportunity for artists to use their talent, to do the things that they really enjoyed, the things that they were really good at. Because what I noticed was they worked with some incredibly talented people, and most of these folks had second and third jobs. They weren't making a lot of money, and that always seemed to me to be a bit of a shame. So this rattled around in my head for years. I was in technology businesses, throughout 25 years, selling technology into businesses in downtown Calgary. And so in the meantime, this is rattling through my head. And then the last company I was with, a company called Mainline Information Systems, we were bought by a company out of Toronto. I was on the leadership team. That was 2015. In 2016, I decided to leave, and that's when I started Stagehand. So the rest is kind of history, and but that really is where it came from.
Oh, very exciting. And so as a typical entrepreneur, you found a challenge, which is an opportunity to most entrepreneurs. And so then you just kind of jumped right into it. And it's a technology play, which then is aligned with your background. So you have that capability to do that yourself then. So I know there's an app to the business model. Did it start out that way as an app right at the very beginning, or is it something that it evolved into?
It did. The initial vision was always, sort of this idea of Airbnb for the arts.
Yeah.
Because we saw that there were all these interesting little places, like a coffee shop. One of our first customers was Gravity Cafe in Inglewood. And the owner is Andy Fennell, and Andy is primarily a restaurateur. He's in at 6 a.m. getting things started, but he also has a passion for music. But that's not really where he came from. But what he wanted to do is he had this valuable coffee shop, this valuable piece of real estate in Inglewood that he wanted to activate during the evenings so that he could bring more people down when the cafe was maybe not busy. And so that's sort of that idea of Airbnb for the arts. So we started building a platform that made it easy for people like Andy to get introduced to artists, to schedule artists, to promote those performances, and so on and so forth. And so the app was really from the beginning. There was always that idea of building this app, this platform that made it easy for businesses and artists to work together.
Okay. And so then the business model for you then, are you taking a percentage of the transactions then that are occurring, or is it a fee to be on the platform as a venue or as a artist? What is the business
Yeah,
model?
that's right, and it's a good question because anybody that's worked in the arts knows that business models in the arts can be very challenging
Yeah.
because particularly at grassroots level, there just isn't a lot of there's just not a lot of money in it, and honestly, that was one of the first lessons that we learned, and where I'd say pivot is too big of a stretch, but the biggest challenge is when you're working with small businesses like coffee shops or microbreweries is you tend to be dealing with the owner operator, and those folks typically don't have a huge budget. So you need to either get to scale very quickly, or you need to be able to charge a reasonable amount, which always presented a problem for these small venues. So um, really when things started to maybe get even a little more interesting for us was in 2018 when I heard an interview on the radio with the Calgary Airport. And the Calgary Airport was looking to start a live music program. They wanted to bring some culture into the terminals, and so they
Yeah.
wanted to start working with local musicians. Of course, they're an airport. They're not talent bookers. They had the same problem that Andy at the coffee shop had, in that, okay, where do we find these artists and how do we book them and how do we do all that efficiently? So I called up the VP. I ended up talking to the folks that are responsible for customer experience, and we helped them launch a live music program. And then based on their specific needs, we actually iterated on the technology. So the Calgary Airport, we essentially started from nothing. They were doing some live music at Stampede and Christmas and that sort of thing. But in the first year, they did over 1,800 live performances in the terminal with local artists.
Oh, wow.
And it was wildly popular. The travelers loved it. You routinely got comments like, you're coming through security and you're putting your shoes back on and you hear the music going in the background. You just assume that it's Muzak pumped in from somewhere. And you look up and there's Ollie Owens or Justine Vandergrift or Josh Williams or somebody literally performing live, and it just completely changes the stress and the feel of being in an airport. So
Yep.
that's when we really started, oh, you know what, there's corporate businesses have a need for this as well. Businesses that have large spaces, whether that's an airport. We also worked with the Edmonton Airport.
Yeah.
In fact, I was down in New Orleans. We were launching the New Orleans airport in March of 2020 when the pandemic unfortunately started to shut things down. But if you look at where else that applies, places like Stephen Avenue, the largest pedestrian mall in downtown Calgary, they're going through a revitalization initiative and would like to attract people and culture to Stephen Avenue to create a vital space. I'm not sure if I don't think it's as bad up in Edmonton, but down here in Calgary,
Yeah.
the downtown core is, there's a real challenge right now in terms of reactivating, bringing people back into the downtown core. And so there are plus 15s there, there's office lobbies, there's all kinds of public spaces that would benefit from greater activation, bringing culture into those spaces, just creating a different feel for the place in general.
Yeah. So back though to the question around what's the business model? Where's the revenue coming
Right.
from? Is it user?
So it comes from the venues. So it
Okay.
comes from the venues itself. So it's free for the artists to sign up for the platform.
Okay.
So essentially it's a SaaS model for the that is charged to the venues to use the platform.
Okay. Yeah. And so regardless of how many they book, it's the same kind of fee, or is it different levels?
There's essentially a staggered fee. So, for a place like the airport that's booking 1,800 performances, it would be different than for, a downtown district that might be booking one performance a week.
I see.
So
Yeah.
there's a staggered fee.
Okay. And so now it's been 5 years. The pandemic has been, wedged in the middle of that or towards the tail end of that, the last 2 years of it. So you were experiencing some good growth, rapid growth. How would you describe it prior to the pandemic? And then what happened as the pandemic, really took control of our lives?
Well, as I mentioned, things were really just starting to ramp up for us in late 2018, early 2019. As I said, we did 1,800 performances at the Calgary airport. We did 1,400 performances at the Edmonton airport. And I was in New Orleans launching it. I was talking to LaGuardia. I was, we had, I would say, a really interesting niche that we're really starting to lean into. That was going to, that was giving us an opportunity to scale and grow. And then all of a sudden the pandemic hit, and I'm sure, most people know that air traffic dropped like literally 95% in the first couple of weeks. And so the airports went from, a thriving, bustling, busy place to a place that was focused on survival and, shutting down terminals to save on operating costs and that sort of thing. So yeah, it had a significant impact on Stagehand. So we started to iterate on that. Live streaming was obviously a something that really came to the forefront during the pandemic. We worked on a number of festivals where we were live streaming performances, trying to maintain our relevance, continuing to develop our relationships, whether it's with local government, local venues, local artists. So yeah, during the pandemic, it's been an exercise in innovating, in continuing to develop the software, but also, like I say, trying to build the relationships so that we're ready for as we start to come out of this, because right now there is a huge need everywhere to reactivate public spaces. Talked to somebody that runs the downtown business improvement district in Los Angeles a few weeks ago, and he indicated that right now they've got a 10% occupancy in downtown Los Angeles because people are working from home. And they're, so commercial real estate is very concerned that are these people going to come back? Or maybe only 60 or 70% of them come back, which potentially creates a serious problem for commercial real estate in the downtown area. So commercial real estate properties are starting to think about experience and how do we improve the experience of being in the downtown core, because there's the potential that the pandemic could systemically change a number of things, that being one of them.
Yeah, I really like where your potential lies, though, because it's very true. If we can activate culture, especially music, I just think that's one of the things that really just attracts people. And so you have the ability through your app for downtowns all over the world to be able to activate that so easily, that where you almost are having a festival, a music festival, could be 7 days a week in these places without a lot of challenge in managing that those relationships and activating the artists. So that's really exciting.
Yeah, and maybe just quick 2 points on that.
Yeah,
I think it's worth mentioning for those that may not be particularly familiar with the arts. The arts has got some real challenges because I always refer to the 2%. They're the 2% who are doing extremely well and are making a lot of money and can afford representation. That's not really who Stagehand is trying to serve. We are trying to serve the 98% that are still, who are often very talented and could, bring their skills into an airport or a downtown core, but aren't, Paul Brandt or Jan Arden or somebody like that. And those are the folks that really we think we have the opportunity to serve. So and they're a huge untapped resource in every single community.
Yeah. The skill level of those, we call them amateurs, is just off the charts in most of the cases, right? They're just one break away from being big. It's yeah, I've
Mhm.
actually, prior to the pandemic, traveling through the Edmonton airport, definitely experienced a number of your artists there, entertaining everybody. And you're right. I mean, they're great. Like they're just incredibly talented individuals, and it definitely does help with the ambience of the, and setting a different tone, a different mood to the whole travel experience. So it was a really welcome experience to have that. And I've been recently through the airport without any music, and yeah, it's definitely lacking. It's missing for sure.
Right.
Yeah, yeah. There's something about music in public spaces that just really soothes, and also I don't know, it rallies people, it draws
Mhm.
people. Yeah, there's an
It
energy.
creates it creates an emotional reaction, I think, is what happens. And
Yeah.
but you're right. It really can change the entire feel of a space.
Now, I'm really curious though. So, your business, like some, is challenged with creating demand and supply kind of at the same time, right? So you're trying to do both. You're trying to connect. Yeah, you have to have a library of artists that the venues are going to be interested in signing up to have access to, and in order to get the artists, you need to have enough demand from the venues to really
Mhm.
be able to demonstrate that this is a worthwhile app, even though it's free for the artist to even bother, being on and going through the onboarding process of that. So walk me through the challenges of trying to build it from both sides at the same time.
Mhm. Yeah, and you're right. It is a two-sided marketplace. Although I would tell you, pardon me, that what we have discovered, uh, and sadly, is the artists are the easy part. That side of the market is really quite easy to get the artists onto the platform. So the challenge is really bringing the venues onto the platform, and where we've demonstrated that is in a place like Los Angeles. We are working with the entertainment district in Los Angeles, and they wanted to activate a small park. They call it a pocket park in amongst a number of office towers, and so they were looking to draw the community back onto the streets, create this sort of exciting urban vibe. And we hadn't worked with anybody in Los Angeles at that point, so we had virtually zero artists on the platform from Los Angeles. And so uh, they put it out on social media that they were starting a live music program, but we also jumped onto Facebook and found some live music groups on Facebook and said, hey, South Park is hiring musicians. If you're interested, here's how you apply. And the artists came flooding in to apply for those spots. So there's no question, there's a perception that without the artists there's no value, but the reality is, if we can get the venues, we've demonstrated time and time again, if there's opportunity, there's lots of opportunity there's lots of places where we can communicate with the arts community that will bring those artists onto the platform to apply for those programs.
So when you're looking at the global scale, it sounds like you're focused really North America at this point, but how is it that you are attracting those venues then? How do you get in front of them? How are you bringing them on? How are you gaining your awareness?
So it's a good question. And oftentimes, places we've started are industry associations. So there are a couple of large airport industry associations. For example, the American Association of Airport Executives, who, believe it or not, a lot of people find this funny. They hold annual conferences on airport customer experience. How do you improve the experience of being in an airport?
Yeah.
So you can go to those conferences. We can exhibit. I was actually at a conference down in New Orleans at the same time we were launching the New Orleans airport, and every single airport from across North America was there. So there's an opportunity to meet with them and network with them and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
There are also places like the International Downtown Association, which is an association for business improvement districts, or BIAs or BIZs, as we call them here in Canada, who are all about revitalizing downtowns. There are organizations like Creative Cities. So usually we look for those sort of, whether it's an association or some sort of natural or group that sort of naturally tries to aggregate those sorts of organizations, and we try to start there and push our message down through the association. Hotels is another one. There's a Calgary Hotel Association that we can get our message out to hotels through the Hotel Association.
Yeah. So now thinking back, it's been 5 years now. You've done a lot. You've survived through the pandemic. If you were to be able to turn back time and really kind of go back and knowing what you know now, is there anything that you would have done differently then as you developed your company, developed the app, pursued the market, penetration there in terms of your awareness and marketing and that? Is there anything that you would have done differently?
There's lots of little things that I'm sure I would have done differently. You make little mistakes on the product, things that you're developing that you think is going to be, something that's exactly what's needed for the customer. And then you realize, oh, we never used it. That was kind of a waste of a month of development effort. So you're always going to have those things. I'm not sure there was any really big mistakes. You might say, well, you started with small venues and then you went sort of to the more corporate venues. By the way, we're still serving the small venues. I love working with the small venues. It's just that we're trying to pursue, from an economic standpoint, from a really making a business of it, we're trying to pursue the larger venues with larger budgets. So, some people might say that was a mistake, but I wouldn't say that's a mistake. I mean, I feel like we cut our teeth with the Gravities and the Half Hitch breweries and the Good Earth cafes and the Cornerstone Music cafes and the small venues really got us into the business, taught us the ropes, introduced us to a whole bunch of artists, got us talking to the local arts community. So I'm not sure that was a mistake per se. But I think the biggest thing, like, I'm always looking for ways to move faster. I wish we could move faster. Obviously, the pandemic has been incredibly frustrating for that, because you want to move, but so often you just can't, because people can't come out of their basements. So that's been a challenge. Other things, as an entrepreneur, there's so much opportunity for support that is out there. Whether it's, in Calgary, we've got Platform, I've got all kinds of mentors and such. And, I think one of the things that you got to figure out how to walk that line between being coachable and trusting yourself and your own instinct, because you'll always meet somebody who had a multi-million-dollar exit and you figure, okay, this person's got, and they'll give you advice. And sometimes that advice is good, and sometimes that advice doesn't mesh with your experience. And so you always want to listen to that, because there's typically many things you can learn from it. But I think you also got to make sure, well, I've been doing this for 5 years, I've talked to every arts organization in Alberta. I'm dealing with airports all over North America. I've been to the customer experience conferences. I actually know a fair bit about my, the domain of expertise. And so you got to find the way to be coachable and to learn from those experts and people that have been there, done that. But at the same time, balance that with your own experience. There's this imposter syndrome that so many of us as entrepreneurs suffer from. And I'm probably, I am guilty of that as well. So just figuring out, just learning to trust yourself and continue to drive forward despite your fears and insecurity.
I think that's a really, really great piece of advice, and something that I don't think I've heard any of our previous guests in the 80 episodes or whatever it's been now that we've been doing this actually touch on that. Because That is so true, right? You have a domain expertise that you've developed through all the hours that you've put into this, and have been thinking through your business model and all the actions that you've taken or that you want to be taking. And yes, there's other people who have been there before you in terms of entrepreneurs, and have had those great exits and so on. They're not as much of an expert in your domain, most likely, as what you are. And so, yeah, you want to be able to borrow some of those concepts and those ideas. But yeah, so I love the way that you framed it in terms of being coachable, but definitely rely on your gut, your expertise as well. I think that's really sage advice. So thank you for that piece. Any other lessons, I guess, that you've learned along the way that you could share with the audience as well?
Well, I think I mentioned the fact that I'm an engineer, but I also would be quick to point out I'm not a real engineer. My partner is the real engineer. My partner is really the architect of the software and the code. And when we first started working together, he's very methodical. And I had all kinds of ideas, and it was big scope. And we sat down for a few hours and whiteboarded this and came up with what I thought was the minimum viable product that we had to build. And when Kylie, that's my partner, when he kind of put that all together and scoped it, like, we were literally talking hundreds of thousands of dollars to build everything that we thought we wanted to build.
Yeah.
And it's and of course, if I had been your stereotypical Silicon Valley entrepreneur with millions of dollars in backing, and we could have just thrown it at that, I probably would have thrown away most of that experience, because we were building that based on what we thought and not necessarily what we had experienced. So just based on necessity, we had to start small. We had to iterate. You had to start working with these customers, and then you allowed that to direct your efforts. And so, I think maybe one of the big pieces of advice for anybody that might be technically inclined, who can go out and write an app and try to build something that's perfect right off the bat, you can take what you think is your minimum viable product and cut it in half, and then probably cut it in half again, and still, and you've probably still done too much. So, I read the book, The Lean Startup, early on, and I think that's a great book for anybody to read. So like I say, whatever you think you need to build, like, cut it back dramatically. Find ways to cut it back dramatically. Concierge things, fake stuff behind the scenes, and you will quickly discover what's valuable and what's not, and then iterate in the direction of what's valuable and stop doing or don't even develop the stuff that's not. So you can always do far more than you think you can with a lot less if you just get a bit creative.
Yeah, and I think that's a really profound statement as well, because one of the things that we as entrepreneurs seem to often do is overbuild. Or we spend way too much time and energy and resources in those early stages just to try to perfect something. And so, I love the idea of going to market with that minimal viable product, so that you can see what the market wants and how they're going to engage or interact, in this case, with the app, and what features they're using and so on. But I think you can take that idea that you said, and just like really paring that down into so many different types of businesses as well. One of the hacks that I often recommend to our clients who are developing things. So as an example, we're working with a leadership coach, and they're thinking about developing another course that's part of their course offering. Well, before you develop that course and actually put all those hundreds and hundreds of hours into writing it, and then designing the slide deck, and maybe creating the videos or whatever that course content is going to be, before you do that, actually sell it before it's even built. And so you can push out, some ads. You can spend $100 in Facebook ads and get those ads in front of people, marketing that course. And then when somebody clicks on the buy button and they get to the landing page to purchase it, one could say, sorry, this has actually been delayed, or we have, some sort of glitch in the back end. Would you like us to reach out to you when we have that fixed, or whatever? And so you might lose a few sales at the front end of that, but that's going to determine whether or not you have enough people that are even interested in that particular topic. And so you can test topics, you can test products, you can sell it before it's actually developed, and that's really key. And then you can really focus then your development time, regardless of what it is that you're developing, in the areas in which the market actually wants it. So yeah,
100% agree.
Yeah, so some really cool hacks there. Well, thank you, Derek. I just can't say how much I appreciate you coming on today and sharing your stories and some of the lessons you've learned. And then just I applaud you from taking that view of something that was a challenge for that whole creative community, especially in the music space, and just really trying to help them develop some sort of means to survive without having those 3-4 jobs that they're having to take on. And so I think what you're doing there is really admirable, but also a great business opportunity. So if somebody wanted to reach out to you, to connect with you, to ask you questions, to maybe become a vendor, or if they're an artist who's listening, how would they connect with you?
They can connect with me directly, Derek at stagehand.app, DEREK at stagehand.app, APP, or you can go to stagehand.app, and you'll find ways to contact us through there. Of course, we're on social media at Stagehand Live. Yeah, lots of different ways that people can reach out.
Excellent. Well, thank you again, Derek. I really appreciate it. And for those of you who were watching today, you enjoyed this episode, check out our archive over at amplifyyourbusiness.ca. And if you happen to be an entrepreneur who wants to share your story, there's an application form there as well. So that's how you can reach out to me. So thank you, Derek. Stay safe down there in Calgary.